You're welcome back from that break. And if you are just joining us, the program is still Good Morning Abuja, coming to you from the Unity Station, NTA Channel 5 Abuja. And now to my first conversation of the day is with Dr. Hannah Ibrahim. She is the Program Director of Social Norms Learning Collaborative and also a social norm advocate. You're welcome to the studio.
Thank you very much. I'm glad
And
to
it's
be
good to
here.
have you. So we'll be looking at social norms learning in Nigeria. So what are the key social norms that impact daily lives here in Nigeria?
Thank you very much. Quite a lot, actually. And I'll just quickly want to define what social norms are. So, social norms are these behaviors or values that people tend to display. And what is critical about them is that they're these unwritten rules that everybody abides by or tends to lean towards. Um, and they're typically accompanied with a reward or a sanction. So, for example, a reward that you would get is, say, for instance, in some parts of Nigeria, if you cut your daughter or if you do female genital mutilation or cutting, the reward is that people would consider your daughter to be chaste, and so the reward is that she would be married or she would have more suitors because they would think that she's not promiscuous. Exactly. And the sanction would be that if you don't do it, they would think or consider your daughter to be promiscuous, and that would mean that she will not get married, and that brings some form of shame to the family. So there are many social norms like that, and interestingly, a lot of them are gender norms. They're linked to what is allowed or what is right for men versus women. So that shows up, yes, and that shows up in many ways. Whether it's a woman is not allowed to, or a girl is not allowed to go to school, and a boy should go because a woman ultimately would end up at home taking care of the family. And when you find people who are outliers who go against that norm in some communities, they are ostracized or they're seen as other. And because we're human beings and we're social, we need social approval as a collective, then people tend to do those things in the way that either they think everybody else is doing it or they think that this is what people expect them to do or that they would be punished if they do not do it.
How does the social norm research contribute to the understanding of behavior in the Nigerian society?
Okay. Research is very critical in understanding the social norms that exist within a community. One, because until you get to the community and interact with the people through different forms of research, you really wouldn't know what the norms are and where they're coming from, who is upholding them. Because within each norm, when you talk about the science of it, there are specific people that you would consider are the reference groups or the people. So for instance,
Elders.
yes, exactly. So we can say mother-in-laws believe that their daughter-in-laws are weak if they deliver at the health facility. These are real issues. In 2023, there's still communities where a woman is considered weak if she has to have a cesarean section, for example, because of a medical indication. And less to that is having to deliver in the facility at all. In many parts of northern Nigeria, you're considered the strongest, for instance, if you deliver at home by yourself. You didn't even have any assistance from your co-wife or from a traditional birth attendant, for example. So research helps us to know what the dynamics are, because at the end of the day, these people are not doing it from a negative place. They're doing it because that's what they think they should be doing. And if we are able to, yeah, and if we're able to understand it, then we can figure out how to change it.
Of successful social norms initiative that you have implemented successfully.
Yeah, I mean, there have been a few. And when I say me in this case, is that we have a community of practice of different people working to shift social norms across Nigeria in the health sector, in the education sector, in the women empowerment sector, etc. And there's been many projects that have been successful, but particularly I want to mention the routine immunization body system, which was a program that we implemented. And it was targeted at shifting behavior and social norms around vaccination at a community level, and also improving women's empowerment to make decisions for vaccination for their children. And that included bringing women together into small groups. In northern Nigeria, women don't really have like groups and that, except of course we go to a wedding or you go to a naming ceremony, that's where they gather and do like taro and things like that. So we try to create support groups sort of for those women so they can share learnings. Exactly. And within each of those groups, we've identified someone who has a positive behavior to immunization, who has vaccinated her kid before, who understands the benefits. And working with that person, we're able to have them meet regularly to discuss and share ideas. And interestingly, not just about immunization. Now, as a group, they are also a cooperative. So we also give them loans as a group, and then they're using that to improve their own lives, improve their families, and gradually we saw that they were having better vaccination for their children and saving their children's lives, because at the end of the day they didn't know how important vaccines were to ensuring that their children's lives were preserved. But also the loans that we gave them, they were able to put into small businesses. I mean, these are women who 10,000 naira can change their lives if they have the right support and know what to do with it. And we then saw that even the community as well was starting to change their perceptions about immunization. I was like, oh, okay, this thing is not as bad. It's not as harmful as we think. And, women can actually gather. Women can sit down and discuss and talk about, exactly, and talk about progressive issues that will improve their families. So that was one.
Are there any specific social norms that have been identified as barriers that are barriers to gender equality, to women's empowerment in Nigeria?
Absolutely.
What are they?
I think there's so many of them. Everything starting from I think everything starting from in a family, for example, and this is even just general about everyone in the family. Say, for instance, the father eats first, or the father eats more meat than every other person in the house, whereas it's the children who are still growing, who are still developing, that need the protein more, for example. And that's just general. Now, when you think about a woman, a girl child, whether or not she goes to school or not is determined by her gender, which it shouldn't be. you know um Gender-based violence, women should not speak, women should not have opinions, and those ultimately translate to harassment that we see, whether it's intimate partner violence or harassment on the streets, whether it's going to the market and men catcalling you and grabbing you as a woman. I have to think twice before I go to the market, for example. Those are social norms that affect daily life, and that are very linked to gender and gender equality generally. Even in terms of the births and delivery, like I mentioned, we also have some norms, and I want to say that it's not always that norms are negative. There are some positive norms, but then they then have implications on that may ultimately be negative. I'll give you an example. So, when a woman delivers, for the first 40 days, she's ideally supposed to be at home, resting, relaxing, being taken care of. But what that means, especially if she delivers at home, is that she's not going to go to the facility for postnatal care, and she's not going to take the child to get their vaccines, for example, that they should get. And that means, and there are some vaccines that if you miss the first 2 weeks of life, that child has missed it for life. And that means that, a lot has been lost in that equation. So in some instances, that 40 days is also like seclusion for some women, and they don't have the psychosocial support that they require to grow. So part of the work that we're doing is also saying there are many positive social norms, if we go back to our cultural heritage, that we can then use to improve or to better the lives or further development in our communities.
What do you intend to do during your upcoming events?
Okay, so the event is the Social Norms Conference.
When is it?
It's on September 25th and 26th, so that is later this month. And we're going to be bringing together key stakeholders. We're going to be bringing together people from government, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Women Affairs, who are the people who make the policies around gender, around social norms, around behavior change. including implementers, NGOs, foreign donors as well, students, researchers from academia, all to come and have different conversations on what progress are we making around changing norms? What opportunities do we have? What are we not doing right? What are successful things? Because everyone is working in different communities. The media is doing a lot in terms of changing perceptions and things like that. So we're going to have media as well to talk about how we can use traditional institutions, media, social media, all kinds of approaches that people have tried. Come together. Exactly. And we will have the policymakers there to say this is what needs to change. And this is the cost of everything that we're doing and how we're going to move forward.
And actually, it's quite interesting. Just listening to you tells me you know a lot about what you're doing. And I am sure a lot of people will just sit down and listen to you. So we need your final word before we let you go.
Okay. I think my final words are that social norms revolve around us. It affects everything that we do, whether consciously or subconsciously as human beings. Whether it's, saying a pregnant woman should not be seen and how people hide even that they're pregnant, for example, or whether it's women stepping up to roles of leadership. We find situations where those happen. Right. And that's because many times we think that that's what people expect us to do, or we think that that's what everybody else is doing. And I want to challenge everyone to question everything that they do every time, to ask why. Why am I doing this? And is this really serving me? Is this positive for me? And understanding that if more people change, then we'll get to a critical mass where enough people will see that people are changing, and then they will change as well. So there is a role that we all have to play as individuals in shifting the norm and being the one to question and challenge those things, even when we see it in our neighbor. If we see our neighbor, for instance, violently harassing his wife, for example, the onus is on us to step in and try to change that.
Thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
We appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
So I've been speaking to Dr. Rahana Ibrahim, and she is the Program Director, Social Norms Learning Collaborative, and we'll be looking at, social norms learning in Nigeria. And she says a lot. Do join them when the program comes up. We're going to short break. We'll be right back.